Hello. Something which I've been thinking about recently is in lines with an article which I read, which said that people who engage a lot in abstract thoughts tend to have a low degree of happiness and satisfaction in their life, which is pretty obvious if you think about it, right? If you're a person who's constantly spending their time researching and thinking a bit more um, about abstractions which have like literally might not have any basis in objective reality, you tend to alienate yourself, and you tend to uh, you tend to be alienated by others, and so it's no surprise that um, abstract thinking comes at a cost. And so we kind of hear of tragic but great historic figures like Mozart, like Einstein, like Jobs, like who, although they were great at their work, the price which they paid for manifestation was, in a sense, a compromise in the quality of their life, and a compromise in the kind of richness which entails, human bonds and connecting with others and being open. And so the price which one then pays for manifestation of any idea is a forgetting of essential nature, forgetting of that richness, that the deepness of consciousness. And I think one of the reasons for this is that if you consider the nature of consciousness, you would see that it's something which is infinite in the sense that it's something which is infinite, but at the same time contains everything which you can conceive in your mind, or which you can see around you. I know this sounds too far out, but during meditation practices, what usually happens is that that we try to bring our attention onto breath while there are many thoughts taking our attention away, and then we try to focus and hold and keep our attention on breath for a sustained period of time while there are these other fluctuations of thought. And if you do that long enough, then what happens is that all the peripheral thoughts begin to cessate, and then there's a cessation of the noise and a sinking into something which is quite broad and quite open. And when you come back from that, you realize thoughts to actually be a fluctuation or a temporary restriction of this broad openness, which fluctuates and then withers away, and then fluctuates and withers away. And you do have a certain choice, so to say, the choice of free will is out of all these fluctuations, you can magnify the strength of a certain fluctuation and put that in the foreground, so to say, instead of putting it in the background. And if you do that for a prolonged period of time, which is what it means to set an intention, then you begin to distill the bits of information which constantly bombard you around this new filter which you have, which has come from your focusing on a particular fluctuation. And so to think any thought which is abstract from reality, this infinite, broad, open consciousness needs to forget its true nature, so they say, to be able to know something other than itself. The idea which I'm speaking about is non-duality, which means that all these objects and all these entities which you see around you, it's not something outside there in the real world. See, like, although I can touch this grass and like pluck it, and it's a stick which I'm holding, and it's almost like this was outside of me. The idea of non-duality is that all of this is happening within the space of consciousness, because I'm not really touching this grass, I'm not really holding this in my hand. What is happening is that the sensations of this grass is playing out in my field of awareness, and so all I know of this glass is existing and is colored by my consciousness. And so the whole world around you, including the sensations which you get from touching this, is happening in your space of consciousness. And so there is no separation and there is no self. And to take it far out, you're part of this stream where all, like the entire universe and all you think of as matter is but a kind of illusion and condensation of this infinite broad consciousness, which assumes these forms and objects of thoughts and grass and matter to know something which is other than itself. So that's the far out version of what thoughts are. And so you could then imagine that if you are a person who's spending a lot of time with thoughts, you tend to keep forgetting more and more of your essential nature, because it becomes restricted. And so usually what happens is that when people who are trying to make a lot of money or create a lot of wealth, or to create great art, or great mathematics, they end up finding themselves in a position where their mind is just filled with like so many different ideas, and all of them is just rushing together, and at that point, they kind of look at people who talk about like poetry, love, emotions as like dreamers and people who can't do anything with their life except like hug trees, because what it actually takes to do things in your life is to be practical, which is to basically know how to put theory into practice, and to be able to do that, you kind of have to know how to dissect the world, in a sense, like dissect this into a lot of into a sort of like such a well-defined picture that once you know where to push and what to push, you can produce actual changes in the world. And so that kind of dissecting and that kind of like jittering is like what brings your field of awareness, what fills your field of awareness with like quite high vibration fluctuations. And usually if you're doing that, then that takes you away from your heart, so to say. Like in my meditation community, everyone always used to tell me the same story. Ankit, go back to your heart, like you're forgetting your heart, be in your heart. And I never really understood that in the beginning, but your heart is basically your essential nature. And the heart of something, the heart of a problem is the essential nature. And your essential nature is that you're not a separate self who is these ideas. You're not your ideas. You're not the steps which you'll take to manifest these ideas. You're the space in which all of this happens. And just because you're aiming for a certain kind of perfection, it shouldn't come at the cost of neglecting those around you. And so this again goes back to a certain polarity, right? So first this broad openness, which is the essential nature, and that's when your mind is sort of relaxed of its fluctuations, and you go back into kind of a spacious, open field of consciousness. And you usually feel that when you're relaxing with loving friends and family. You feel the sense of yourself expand, because you then become part of a superorganism, and you become more of the units which make it up. And then you have the kind of constriction, the kind of like going in, and then like all these fluctuations, and you're in the dynamic mode where you're just going and like working, and it's all happening so fast, and like you're doing your product, you're working on your pitch, you're working on your company, and it's all like jittery, right? And then the traditional paradigm which we have is that you go and jitter throughout the week, and then you go in the weekend and you relax into this broad openness. And maybe it's like you jitter in the morning when you're in the workplace, and you kind of your consciousness is filled with these fluctuations called thought, and you're thinking very fast, and you're doing things fast, and you're responding to feedback. But then when you go back home, you can relax, you can open up, you can go to this broad mode. So most people then, most successful people, most happy people find themselves where they are switching between these two modes, right? So jittery, relax, jittery, relax. Thinking fast, thinking slow. But there is a state of mind when you can be both simultaneously. And I guess that's what it meant to be in the world but not of it, and that's the state which is referred to as enlightenment. You see, in that state of enlightenment, you can be the broad, open consciousness and fluctuate at the same time, right? So in the jitteriness, we sort of forget our broad openness. And sometimes in the broad openness, we forget to jitter, to actually manifest and move forward with life. But if you can do both, you see, that's when you will not experience death, which is a different blog entry, obviously. But that's when all the jitters which come up, right, would come up in your field of awareness. So it would be like, as the fluctuation comes and tries to, so previously, like when the fluctuation comes as an object in your field of awareness, you just latch onto it, and you work with the object, and then you're going to forget the openness, right? But this time when the object comes up, it's not something which you engage in the sense that it's almost like you're in the battlefield but not of it. It's almost like playing a video game where you're like the shooter, but at the same time, you have the broad overview of the map where all your opponents are and where everything is happening at the same time. So you have an eagle-eye view on life, and then you have a down-to-earth mode of operation. And that state of enlightenment is when you can be eagle-eyed but down-to-earth at the same time. So you can change your fluctuations at will, and you can fluctuate really hard. You're thinking very hard. And there's so many thoughts which come up, but at the same time, you don't lose space. And when the thoughts come up, you're still in that broad open space. And when the thoughts jitter away, you're still in that broad open space. When other people drop their anxiety onto you, you're not moved, but their anxiety moves through you. Previously it's like, and then you fight, right? But it's like, and it's all in that same field. And so you're thinking fast and slow at the same time, while positioned in a place which is beyond your thoughts, beyond your sensations, something which is eternal, bornless, deathless.